On Monday, Trump told a group of farmers Deere could face major tariffs if the company outsources jobs to Mexico.
John Deere CEO John May just revealed the company are shutting down production in the U.S. and moving abroad after the newly elected President Donald Trump announced steep tariffs on key trade partners. In a move that stunned employees and sent ripples through the agricultural sector, May explained that surging costs tied to incoming duties have eroded the competitive edge of American-built agricultural machinery. He emphasized how reciprocal tariffs from Canada, Mexico, and the European Union have made it prohibitively expensive for those markets to import John Deere's tractors and combine harvesters, while simultaneously inflating the price of components sourced internationally. Faced with the dual squeeze of higher input costs and reduced demand overseas, the decision to relocate assembly lines to friendlier tariff environments marks a dramatic pivot for the storied manufacturer. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. The announcement was delivered in a somber tone, acknowledging the weight of shuttering factories that have been cornerstones of rural towns for generations. May recounted conversations with long-tenured workers who wrestled with the reality that their livelihoods would shift beyond national borders. He stopped short of specifying which countries would host the new plants, but industry insiders point to Mexico and Eastern Europe as likely destinations, given their established supply chains and more favorable tariff regimes. For decades, American-made farm equipment has been synonymous with reliability and domestic pride. The relocation decision underscores the intensifying pressures of geopolitical maneuvering on global supply chains. Tariffs introduced by the Trump administration targeted steel and aluminum imports, ostensibly to bolster domestic industries. In practice, however, those raw materials feed directly into the manufacturing processes at John Deere's sprawling facilities in Illinois, Iowa, and Georgia. With steel prices skyrocketing by nearly 25% in the months following the tariff announcement, profit margins on tractors, already thin in a commodity-driven market, slid into the red. Behind the scenes, Deere's financial team ran scenario analyses, demonstrating that shifting production offshore could recoup lost margins and preserve the company's bottom line, albeit at a social cost to American workers. On the diplomatic front, trade partners responded swiftly. Canada imposed counter tariffs on U.S.-made agricultural machinery, hitting John Deere particularly hard in a region where it once commanded a dominant market share. Mexican authorities followed suit, targeting heavy equipment to protest what they described as unfair trade practices. Even the European Union, traditionally less entangled in North American trade disputes, slapped duties on American farm tractors. Each tit-for-tat measure chipped away at Deere's global sales, pushing management to consider radical restructuring. When the company's board convened to assess strategic options, the consensus was stark: either absorb mounting losses or pivot production abroad. For rural communities in the heartland, the news has been met with shock and dismay. Towns once built around the hum of assembly lines and the camaraderie of factory shifts now face an uncertain future. Small businesses, from diners to hardware stores, that depended on Deere employees as regular patrons brace for leaner years. Local mayors and state legislators have scrambled to propose incentives aimed at keeping operations domestic, from tax abatements to infrastructure grants. Yet Deere executives have indicated that no package could offset the decisive financial advantages offered by lower-cost jurisdictions and tariff exemptions. At its core, John Deere's move highlights a broader tension between protectionist economic policies and the realities of a deeply interconnected global marketplace. While the rhetoric of tariffs champions safeguarding domestic industries, the practical fallout can yield unintended consequences. By driving up input costs and provoking retaliatory barriers, policymakers inadvertently create incentives for companies to seek greener pastures overseas. In this sense, Deere's decision serves as a cautionary tale about the delicate balance between nationalistic trade policies and the welfare of homegrown manufacturing. Beyond the immediate shockwaves, the shift carries implications for supply chain dynamics across the agricultural sector. Component suppliers, many of which are small or family-owned, now face dwindling orders from Deere's U.S. plants. The ripple effect could cascade into related industries, steel mills, foundries, electronics manufacturers, further eroding the industrial base that underpins American economic strength. Meanwhile, competitors based in Europe and Asia stand to gain ground in the U.S. market, having already established production footprints unrestricted by the latest trade barriers. Deere's retreat from domestic production thus signals a potential realignment of market share, altering the competitive landscape for years to come. Analysts have pointed to China's response to earlier U.S. tariffs as a precedent. When Washington imposed duties on Chinese-made machinery, Beijing retaliated with levies on agricultural goods, cutting off export markets for U.S. farms. As American producers sought alternative markets, equipment manufacturers scrambled too. Deere, with its diversified global reach, weathered the storm but recognized that repeated cycles of tariff escalation could inflict lasting damage. Today's decision reflects a strategic pivot aimed at insulating the company from geopolitical volatility by situating production in regions benefiting from more stable trade agreements. On the human front, John May has pledged support for displaced workers, including severance packages, job placement assistance, and retraining programs. Yet critics argue these measures fall short of preserving the economic lifeblood of small towns that grew around Deere facilities. Labor unions have called the move a betrayal, accusing corporate leaders of putting profits over people. Union representatives are exploring legal challenges, questioning whether Deere fully exhausted domestic alternatives before greenlighting the closures. The battle lines drawn between corporate management and organized labor underscore the emotional stakes at play. Meanwhile, President Trump defended his tariff policies as necessary for national security and the revival of American industry. In a statement released after Deere's announcement, the White House reiterated its commitment to hardline trade stances, framing the corporate decision as a temporary hurdle on the path to stronger domestic manufacturing. Administration officials promised to revisit tariff structures and explore exemptions for key industries, hinting at potential negotiations with Deere and other affected manufacturers. Whether such diplomatic interventions can reverse Deere's course remains uncertain, as contracts for new facilities abroad are reportedly already underway. Financial markets reacted sharply to the news. Deere's stock price dipped in the hours following the announcement, reflecting investor concerns about the company's exposure to political risk. Over the past quarter, Deere had posted healthy earnings, buoyed by strong demand for high-tech precision agriculture equipment. The sudden pivot to offshore production introduces execution risks, construction delays, logistical challenges, regulatory hurdles that could weigh on future earnings. Some institutional investors have urged Deere to slow down the plant relocations, advocating for a phased approach that retains a partial domestic footprint to mitigate reputational damage. The decision also reignites debates about the long-term viability of manufacturing in high-wage economies. Proponents of reshoring argue that proximity to core markets, intellectual property protections, and skilled labor advantages still make domestic production attractive. Critics counter that automated, capital-intensive factories require fewer workers, making labor costs a secondary consideration. Deere's example may embolden other manufacturers grappling with similar tariff-induced pressures to reevaluate their footprints. As global trade patterns evolve, companies will weigh the trade-offs between cost efficiency and the strategic benefits of keeping operations close to home. Environmental considerations further complicate the picture. Deere's U.S. plants adhere to strict emissions and waste management regulations, ensuring high environmental standards. Overseas facilities, depending on jurisdiction, may operate under laxer rules, potentially increasing the company's carbon footprint. Deere's leadership has insisted that any new plant will meet or exceed U.S. environmental norms, but enforcement in foreign settings can prove challenging. Environmental groups have voiced concern that tariff-driven relocations risk undermining progress on sustainability, highlighting a tension between economic and ecological objectives. Technological innovation stands to be reshaped by Deere's decision. The company has invested heavily in automation and smart factory technologies, deploying robotics and digital monitoring systems across its U.S. facilities. Transferring these innovations overseas will require significant capital outlays. But new plants designed from the ground up could incorporate even more advanced Industry 4.0 features. Whether Deere can replicate the synergy between American engineering talent and cutting-edge production methods abroad will determine its future competitiveness. The move also underscores the growing importance of technological agility in an era of shifting trade policies. On the policy front, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have seized on Deere's announcement to press for legislative solutions. Some propose targeted tax credits or wage subsidies to incentivize domestic manufacturing, while others advocate for multilateral trade agreements that reduce the likelihood of tariff escalation. Yet crafting policies that appease political constituencies, satisfy corporate interests, and withstand global economic pressures remains a formidable challenge. Deere's case has crystallized the dilemma. Aggressive protectionism can inadvertently hollow out the domestic industrial base it seeks to defend. Internationally, Deere's shift could alter the balance of power in agricultural mechanization. Countries hosting the new plants may benefit from job creation, technology transfers, and enhanced local expertise. Over time, these regions could develop their own supply chains and aftermarket services, challenging Deere's traditional role as the primary equipment provider in those markets. At the same time, U.S. farmers will confront higher equipment prices or reduced service availability if domestic production wanes. The unintended consequence of tariffs designed to help American workers may be a diminished competitive position for U.S. agriculture itself. Consumers and end users are not immune to the fallout. Higher costs passed on by Deere's production move may raise the price of new tractors, placing additional financial strain on farmers already grappling with volatile commodity markets. Smaller operators in particular could struggle to justify equipment upgrades, potentially slowing the adoption of precision farming technologies that promise efficiency gains. As production realigns globally, farmers may find themselves paying premiums or waiting longer for delivery, disrupting planting schedules and farm management plans. The narrative of national pride that once accompanied the Made in USA label takes on new complexity. For John Deere, the green and yellow machines rolling off domestic assembly lines represented more than commerce. They symbolized American ingenuity and resilience. Relocating production abroad challenges that identity, raising questions about the meaning of domestic manufacturing in an age of globalization. It underscores how geopolitical forces can reshape national narratives and corporate legacies in an instant. Despite the upheaval, some analysts remain cautiously optimistic about Deere's long-term prospects. By insulating the business from tariff volatility and optimizing cost structures, the company could emerge leaner and more resilient. Strategic partnerships with host country suppliers may spur innovation and open new avenues for growth in emerging markets. Moreover, Deere's commitment to maintaining high environmental and labor standards abroad could set a positive example for responsible globalization. Success hinges on meticulous execution and the company's ability to balance efficiency gains with its storied heritage. The decision by John May and his leadership team will undoubtedly spark ongoing debate among executives, policymakers, and workers. It highlights the intricate web of factors that companies must navigate in today's polarized trade environment. As the first tractors destined for overseas assembly roll off international lines, the agricultural world will watch closely to see whether Deere's gamble pays off, or whether the costs, economic, social, and political, prove too high to bear. The stakes extend beyond a single corporation. They touch on the broader questions of how nations define and defend their industrial futures in an interconnected age. As the first overseas assembled Deere machines prepare to roll off foreign lines, a new chapter opens in the saga of globalized manufacturing. The quiet declension of America's share in its own industrial crown has been years in the making. A gradual relocation of parts production followed by this decisive exit from domestic assembly represents the culmination of market forces, policy shifts, and strategic calculus. Yet the most intriguing questions lie not in what has already transpired, but in how Deere, and the industries and communities intertwined with it, will navigate the path ahead. For one, the relocation presents an unprecedented opportunity for Deere to rethink its after-sales service model. Historically, the company's service network, a vast constellation of dealerships, parts warehouses, and field technicians, has been optimized for equipment built on American soil. Transitioning manufacturing abroad will require a parallel reconfiguration of logistics, how to stock spare parts, train local mechanics, and maintain warranty commitments without the buffer of domestic proximity. In some regions, Deere may choose to establish regional distribution hubs, leveraging rail and maritime links to streamline the flow of components. In others, it might rely on local partners to manage inventory and repair operations, effectively franchising the Deere standard to third parties. The success of these arrangements will depend on the strength of relationships cultivated in emerging markets and the flexibility of Deere's global supply chain. At the same time, technological integration looms large. Deere's newest machines come outfitted with telematics systems that stream data on performance, repair needs, and usage patterns back to centralized servers. This connected farm model not only improves uptime, but also lays the foundation for precision agriculture services, soil mapping, yield forecasting, and remote diagnostics. With assembly shifting abroad, Deere must ensure that the digital backbone remains seamless. It will need to invest in robust cybersecurity measures to protect proprietary algorithms and customer data, even as data centers housing those systems may remain in the US for regulatory and intellectual property reasons. Moreover, aligning software development with hardware production across multiple time zones and cultural contexts will demand new organizational practices and coordination tools. The move also has deep repercussions for workforce development at home. While Deere has pledged support for displaced employees, many of whom possess decades of specialized expertise, the closure of domestic plants risks erasing entire skill ecosystems. Welding specialists, CNC operators, and industrial robotics technicians will find their trades less in demand, unless retraining programs can quickly pivot them into emerging fields. State universities and community colleges in the Midwest have already begun crafting curriculum partnerships with Deere, focusing on advanced manufacturing, mechatronics, and data analytics. These programs aim to equip students with skills not just for tomorrow's factories, but for entirely new professions in renewable energy, biomedical devices, and autonomous systems. Whether this upskilling can offset job losses remains uncertain, but it illustrates one avenue through which legacy manufacturing hubs might reinvent themselves. Beyond the US border, the host countries stand to reap economic and social dividends. The infusion of capital associated with building new Deere plants, a wager of hundreds of millions of dollars, can catalyze local industrial clusters. Suppliers of metal castings, hydraulic systems, and electronic control units may sprout around the primary facilities, drawn by proximity and the promise of volume orders. Governments eager to attract foreign direct investment may sweeten the deal with further incentives, such as expedited land permits, subsidized utilities, and joint research grants. In Eastern Europe, for instance, regional development agencies are already touting Deere's arrival as validation of their bid to become a machinery-making powerhouse. In Mexico, state governors are positioning the new plants as a linchpin of job creation, particularly in areas seeking post-NAFTA economic diversification. Still, integrating labor cultures poses its own challenges. Deere's American workforce has long prided itself on a culture of continuous improvement. Kaizen events, quality circles, and frontline employee suggestion programs are embedded in the company's ethos. Transplanting these practices to new sites requires careful change management. Local managers must balance respect for established work traditions with the introduction of Deere's problem-solving methodologies. Language barriers, differences in workplace norms, and variations in regulatory oversight can complicate seemingly straightforward initiatives like safety training or quality audits. Deere executives have floated the idea of extended rotations, where experienced managers from American plants spend months abroad to mentor local teams. Conversely, rising stars from the new facilities may be invited to headquarters for leadership development, a two-way exchange aimed at forging a unified corporate culture. Financially, the offshore pivot will unfold against the backdrop of currency fluctuations. Deere must hedge its exposures not only in dollars, but also in euros, pesos, zlotys, and other currencies of its manufacturing bases. Too strong a host country currency could erode cost advantages, while too weak a dollar might inflate the real expense of repatriating profits. Financial risk management will become more complex, requiring sophisticated treasury operations and collaborative forecasting between regional CFOs. The company's credit ratings, too, will be scrutinized by bond investors who will weigh the promise of higher margins against the risks of executing a multi-continent expansion under a cloud of political uncertainty. On a broader strategic plane, Deere's move challenges assumptions about the resilience of domestic supply chains. A decade ago, many manufacturers began exploring nearshoring, bringing production closer to core markets to reduce lead times and bolster control. The tariff shocks of today, however, have reversed that trend, encouraging firms to seek out jurisdictions that offer tariff-free access to multiple end markets. In this sense, Deere's decision is emblematic of a new phase of globalization, one where corporate footprints become ever more fluid, shifting in response to a patchwork of tariffs, sanctions, and trade blocs. To maintain agility, companies will need to develop modular factories, facilities designed for rapid scaling up or down, with core systems that can be reconfigured for different product lines or regions. Deere's investments in digital twins, virtual models of physical plants, may accelerate this shift, enabling engineers to simulate K-factor changes, workflow rerouting, and quality outcomes before committing to capital expenditures. At the same time, the geopolitical landscape continues to evolve. Should the U.S. administration recalibrate its tariff strategy, perhaps in response to an election outcome or multilateral trade talks, Deere may find itself tethered to a less optimal configuration. Factories built abroad cannot be relocated overnight, and breaking ground on those sites signals a degree of permanence. The company's leadership must therefore maintain close dialogue with policymakers, advocating for stable, predictable trade rules even as it hedges against uncertainty. To that end, Deere has purportedly hired a cadre of former diplomats and trade attorneys to its government affairs team, ensuring that its interests are represented in Geneva, Brussels, and Washington. Meanwhile, competitors will be watching closely. European manufacturers such as AGCO and CNH have long operated transatlantic production networks, and Japanese firms like Kubota have expanded their U.S. footprint in recent years. Deere's retreat from domestic assembly opens a window of opportunity for these rivals to market made-in-America credentials to U.S. farmers who value local production. Deere must guard against losing mindshare in its home market by reinforcing its brand through service excellence, digital offerings, and local support centers. Marketing campaigns emphasizing continuity, your Deere, wherever it's built, may help, but convincing historically brand-loyal customers that quality won't suffer due to geographic shifts will be a tightrope act. Another dimension to consider is the environmental and social governance (ESG) implications. Investors increasingly pressure corporations to demonstrate not just profitability, but also responsible stewardship of labor rights and the environment. While Deere commits to equipping its new plants with cutting-edge emissions controls, recyclability standards, and renewable energy sources, stakeholders will scrutinize implementation. NGOs and labor organizations may conduct audits to verify that working conditions abroad match or exceed those upheld domestically. Failure to meet these expectations could trigger reputational risks, regulatory scrutiny, or even consumer boycotts. To preempt such backlash, Deere might pursue third-party ESG certifications such as the Responsible Business Alliance Audit or ISO 14001 Environmental Management Accreditation across its global network. In the realm of innovation, the shift overseas could spur collaborations with regional research institutions. Deere's research labs in the American Midwest have traditionally focused on agronomic systems relevant to large-scale U.S. commodity farming, corn and soybean belts, wheat plains, and cotton fields. By establishing a presence in new geographies, the company gains the opportunity to co-develop machinery optimized for diverse crops, rice terraces, olive groves, sugar plantations, or tea estates. Local universities bring in valuable agronomic insights and may partner with Deere on trials, leveraging field data to refine machine configurations. Such collaborations could yield a broader portfolio of specialized equipment, positioning Deere to capture growth in emerging agricultural markets across Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Concurrently, Deere's suppliers face a pivotal juncture. Tier 1 suppliers of transmissions, hydraulic pumps, and precision guidance systems must decide whether to follow production offshore or negotiate new contracts for US-based supply. Some may choose to geographically diversify themselves, establishing joint ventures in Mexico or Eastern Europe to maintain volume with Deere while preserving their domestic operations. Others, particularly smaller firms lacking the capital for overseas expansion, might lose business altogether. Deere has indicated intentions to offer preferred supplier status to those willing to invest in new production footprints. But this approach may exacerbate consolidation in the supplier base, ultimately reducing competition and innovation. Amid all this, the global farm economy is itself undergoing transformation. Climate change pressures, shifting dietary patterns, and technological leaps are redefining the contours of agriculture. Deere's strategic decision cannot be viewed in isolation from these trends. As farmers adopt drones, autonomous harvesters, and biotechnological enhancements, the traditional tractor may evolve into a node within a broader robotic ecosystem. Deere's global plant network must therefore be flexible enough to produce not only heavy-duty tractors, but also lighter, battery-powered vehicles, sensor-laden implements, and precision sprayers. Modular design platforms will be essential, allowing factories to pivot production lines swiftly in response to changing demand profiles, from large-scale grain operations to small-scale specialty farms. Socially, the cultural impact of Deere's departure from U.S. assembly plants will reverberate in unexpected ways. Company-sponsored community events, from county fairs to vocational scholarships, have long been part of Deere's social contract in factory towns. The loss of these touchpoints may hollow out civic life, diminishing opportunities for local youth engagement and community building. Some towns are exploring how to repurpose old factory sites, turning them into innovation hubs, makerspaces, or mixed-use developments. Success in these endeavors could offer blueprints for other communities facing deindustrialization, illustrating pathways from manufacturing roots to diversified post-industrial economies. Internationally, Deere's new plants could become anchors for regional development strategies that integrate manufacturing with broader economic planning. In Mexico, the government's Pro-Mexico initiative aims to foster high-tech clusters by co-locating universities, factories, and logistics corridors. Deere's presence could accelerate these plans, attracting ancillary businesses in transportation, warehousing, and fintech solutions for agricultural finance. In Eastern Europe, European Union structural funds earmarked for regional convergence may co-finance infrastructure upgrades, roads, rail links, and power grids around Deere's new facilities. These synergies illustrate how a single corporate decision can set off a chain reaction of economic activity, reshaping regional geographies of production and growth. On the agricultural front, the ripples extend to farm-level decision-making. If financing for new equipment becomes more complex, due to fluctuating tariffs, currency risks, or delivery timelines, farmers may delay purchases or explore alternative models, such as equipment cooperatives, rental services, or pay-per-use schemes. Deere has already piloted subscription-based access to certain high-tech implements. Expanded overseas production could accelerate these service models, transforming the company from an equipment seller to an integrated solutions provider. Such shifts could democratize access to cutting-edge machinery for smaller farmers, but they also challenge traditional revenue streams based on outright sales, demanding new pricing and maintenance structures. Finally, the narrative of Deere's offshore pivot underscores the delicate interplay between national policy and corporate strategy. As the appetite for protectionist measures waxes and wanes across capitals, companies will be compelled to embed policy risk into their long-term planning more explicitly. Deere's 2025 decision may be remembered as a watershed, a clear marker of globalization's latest iteration, where production footprints are optimized not just for cost or logistics, but for the shifting sands of trade politics. For students of business strategy, Deere's experience will serve as a case study in resilience and adaptability. How a heritage brand redefined itself in the face of political headwinds, economic imperatives, and the inexorable march of globalization. In the end, the story of John Deere's offshore shift is not merely about lines on a balance sheet or factories on a map. It is about the realignment of human endeavor. Engineers, assembly workers, farmers, suppliers, and policymakers all adjusting to new realities. It is about the choices societies make between insulation and integration, between short-term security and long-term vitality. And it is about the future of agriculture itself, as technology, trade, and policy converge to reshape one of humanity's oldest endeavors. Deere's bold step into a reconfigured world of manufacturing will stand as a testament to the power of strategic reinvention, and as a cautionary tale of the costs and complexities that come when geopolitics and commerce collide. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on John Deere moving abroad after Trump's tariffs? What's next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.